Welcome to another edition of EdVenture. Today we have Maria Laws of Ahura AI, which is a learning company focused in on artificial intelligence and learning sciences. How you doing, Maria?
I'm great, Ahmad. Really excited to get to talk to you today.
Absolutely. So I can sit up here and make an attempt to articulate what Ahura does, but there's no need to do that because I have you here to be crystal clear about it. So, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about Ahura AI and what exactly is their product and their purpose.
Right, absolutely. It's funny. I came to Ahura not as an engineer and not as an MBA, but as an educator. And it is fairly rare to have a practicing educator in an AI type firm, is what I've been noticing. And I think that's one of the reasons why they were able to pull me out of the classroom and into this space that is definitely not my day to day. And it's because what Ahura AI is trying to do is to support people that are learning on their own, whether they be in high school, college, or more likely what we're thinking about is for folks that are trying to add additional skills so that they can do well in their job or to chart a different career pathway. How do we help them when they're by themselves, when they don't have a teacher with them? And so here they are bringing in a teacher like myself to help them design an algorithm that can provide some of the feedback and support that a facilitator or a teacher does when you're in an in-person learning scenario. So getting to chance to really dig into, say, the science of learning, behavioral psychology, cognitive science, and see how we can infuse that into this really powerful technology that we now have available to us, AI, in order to use AI for good, meaning to help people grow and be their best, to have them use their own data to make decisions that will make their life better. It's been a really exciting time to work there.
Well, you said something that's quite provocative, and that is, how can AI actually work with learning? So often when we think of AI, we think of it as something that's going to replace someone versus the idea that it can actually assist you in becoming a better learner. How do you go by articulating how those two work together?
Absolutely. I am sure that someone somewhere would love to replace facilitators and teachers with AI. But I think that we're in a much more realistic place that at the end of the day, teaching and learning are human experiences that require so much nuance in order to understand not only scope and sequence and timing, what feedback, when, how much follow up, and the tone you use. There's so many levels. The idea for us has always been that AI could be a support. It could be what tech has always been sort of created to be, which is a tool rather than an end. So that's sort of like the first place that we start. And the second thing that I have in my mind as you were asking me this is that my CEO and COO, one of the first things they asked me when I came in was name the top 10 things that expert teachers do. And I was like, oh, what, right now? So I kind of just listed out some things,
Sure.
but this was what their thinking was. What are the pieces that we can translate as a support for someone on their own to then do what they can in that setting and then move themselves into a place where they're either applying that learning on the job or they're in connection with another person to then amplify and deepen the lesson. So which of those things that I'm pulling out as the best of the best could we actually replace, assist, or augment in a way that will still be better than the learner by themselves, even though we know that it's probably, we can't see a time anytime soon that it's going to be equal to what a relationship with a person could be.
So what does that look like in real time in a particular type of learning environment or enterprise with Ahura AI being a driver or an assistant to the learning process?
Sure. Great question. So if I were a learner and I was sitting down to learn and I wanted to have Ahura help me kind of stay focused and do the thing, right? I would get on my computer, go to my Ahura homepage, and I would simply press start session and put in a single word about what I'll be learning. So let's just say that today I want to learn about blockchain. So I'd write in blockchain and I'd start the Ahura algorithm. And at that point, Ahura is looking at a couple things. And again, our roadmap is there'll be more things, but for now, these are the main three. The first one that we're looking for is content relevancy. This is really simple stuff. Where am I going online? You know, am I actually looking at blockchain YouTube videos or a Coursera course? Or did I take a little stopover at TikTok and I'm learning a new dance? You know, like how long did that happen for? And as that's happening, a little pop up will come up and say, hey, it looks like it's time to refocus. Like there's a nice little message saying, just as a teacher would, like, hey, how's that going? Do you need a little help there? When we both know you don't really need help except for it's time to like focus back. So just those little in time pop up messages, like it, kind of like a nicer version of "Are you there still?" But something along those lines, but more learner centered. So that's one bit of data that's happening. But there are two other things that are happening as well that aren't about the websites and are more about what's happening for you as you're learning. And one of them is around emotions, the seven major emotions. There's already code written for that even before we got to it that can help you see how you're reacting and responding to the things that you're viewing or reading.
Oh,
But
wow.
the third part is the part that I'm most interested in. And then I have sort of like some of the research end too. Like I get to do some of the work of this on the back end, which is what does focus look like to me as a teacher? What how can we translate that into focus looking like to the algorithm, and then how can we help learners get a real sense of where they are in their session in terms of their engagement? So it's not just where you went on the computer, but when you were looking at the particular video, how are you engaging with it? So I'll give an example. When I did some research around what computer scientists are looking for, and then and kind of combining it to what I would look for in a classroom, kind of broke it down to three areas: what's happening with the eyes, what's happening with the face, what's happening with the body. So, and then I had to kind of think about what focus looks like to me. What do I trigger as a teacher to go over and ask someone if they need help or if it's time to get back on track? I usually go with the big movements first, right? Like, are they leaning in? Are they, you know, lying down? Like, what are we talking here? But online, it's really not so much about that. It's more about eyes. Where are the eyes looking and what's happening with the face? We call it frozen face. So there's this difference between neutral face, which seems to be really the most active learning face, versus frozen face, where that person has moved on to some other thoughts unrelated to whatever's happening on the screen. And so we're doing quite a bit of work on kind of perfecting that algorithm so that we can not only tell the learner what we're seeing about them as they're learning, but also developing on my end a whole host of science of learning tips and tricks that we can both send by email and also in session, because sometimes it's, hey, it's time to get back on track, and sometimes it's, I think you need a break. You know, this idea that a lot of our learning is not you not doing your job, it's that there's some biology involved and you've probably been sitting too long. Take a break, come back, you'll be much more efficient. So what we found, Ahmad, is that even in the early stages where we didn't really have a lot of this mapped out the way that we do right now, just a learner knowing that the algorithm, the camera was being used to reflect data back to them was enough to change their behavior to the point where people were 3 times more likely to finish that MOOC, which is crazy. That's a huge difference.
So can we talk a little bit about kind of the technology and how it allows for the learner to learn about their state, their mood?
Mhm.
I think what we didn't mention is that the AI is working with the optics of a camera
Mhm.
to kind of monitor what's going on with you. Can you just tell us a little bit about how that
Yeah,
works?
absolutely. Everything's happening through the camera. So the data that we're getting is either, well, through the website. Website locations and getting using the NLP to go ahead and decide are enough words related to the capability that you mentioned. So that's the one end. But the other things around emotion and around focus are all through the camera. So it works better if you're in a lighted place, if you're sitting up versus lying down. Like there's some ways that we can improve the accuracy of the data that we give back to you. But again, no matter what we're returning back to you, you at the learner are still at the center. You're still the driver. You have to decide what you're going to do with that. It's kind of like the way that I would term it. One way to think about it is kind of like a Fitbit. Fitbit has done amazing things for a lot of people with their fitness levels, not only around exercise time and kind of strenuous activity levels, but also, are you drinking enough water? How much sleep are you getting? Simply by giving back your data in an appealing way to you that once makes you want to engage with it and makes you want to make it be different. I know I get very irritated when I don't have my bars up for my amount of water every day, and that is absolutely going to motivate me to make some changes. And we're using that same idea of what motivates people to make changes.
So this is really about analytics and self-awareness and taking action in order to improve or optimize your learning experience.
Yeah, I think when we first started talking about it, it was one of the biggest things we found about is that we had to find a way to shift the conversation away from monitoring. That many times in a fast-paced business, managers are thinking about ways to keep an eye on their workers. They want to, they want to know how they're doing, but they also
Sure.
need to move things forward. But that monitoring place is actually not very incentivizing for your workforce. I mean, I get into the short term that you might think it's getting you where you need to go, but it's exhausting to you. It doesn't help the culture. And over the long term, people either just sort of like low key, passive aggressively don't do what you want, or they leave and then you start all over again. So
I'm, I'm
this
actually
idea,
I'm actually glad you bring this up because I think during COVID, a lot of employers who decided that they would deploy um, allowing people to work from home. I was actually surprised that there were several companies that also deployed ways of monitoring their employees, their workers, in a way that created their own home into a surveillance state. And so, I think having these type of safeguards, and also, the strategy behind what you all are doing is critical to making sure that it's about the learning experience. How did these conversations take place around how to keep this core focus and
yeah.
not have it kind of move into other potential areas?
I'm really happy you brought this up because number one, it's going to be an ongoing conversation. It's going to be an ongoing negotiation, right? Because you get asked for everything. And so we've had to make decisions from the beginning about what data does the learner see and what data does the manager see, and
Mhm.
they are not the same in any way. A manager doesn't need to know how you felt about doing the training. They need to know, did you pass the training? Did you complete the training, right? So those are things that we've had really good conversations around. Just because it's asked for doesn't mean you have to just say, here you go. That's where me as a teacher, as an educator, can be a bit of a support about getting to the heart of what it is that they really want to do, and then recommending things that will get them there that I know are the way to get them there. So again, this idea that all the data for all the people, for whatever reason they think is going to help them, oftentimes what they're thinking isn't the right strategy. So going back to your question, for us, the way that Ahura was set up by Brian and Alex, our co-founders, really came from a real commitment from the beginning to ethical AI. That this was going to be AI for good, and that we literally, it's a part of every week meeting. I have a tech meeting, an AI meeting, and a leadership meeting every week. And in every single one of those spaces, we are in conversation about not only what we're creating, but how to talk about it and where there could be some unintended consequences or things we need to mitigate, either in the AI code itself or in our conversations with potential clients or investors about how it should, could, and is best used. So it's ongoing. Like it's never going to end. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge and critical priority of AI going forward, because if people don't trust it, we can't get the benefit from it. And if we don't keep talking about it, we run the risk of real harm for folks. So for us, it's about discussion every week, every week.
No, that's fantastic. It's great to hear that you're actually bringing not only discussion, because ethical AI has to be, I would think, it has to be a critical part of your business practice in terms of how that gets applied every day in the customer experience. So from a company standpoint, let's say from a manager, how does Ahura AI support the work of a manager? Because you just mentioned how, this is a great learner experience and how it brings a level of self-awareness by learning about the analytics and the data and what they do best at what time, et cetera. How can this support managers and the enterprise at large?
I was really struck. There are a couple different ways, but one of the things that came to my mind right away was I was reading some statistic, which I do not have off the top of my head. My apologies, but it was about the number of positions that go unfilled within a business, that there were people actually in the business that could have taken on that role. But instead, they spent more time in recruitment outside, and may or may not have gotten the right person, but that time and money and investment where they could have done some internal restructuring that would have been much faster, rapid to deploy, and have people that already were onboarded and within the culture that already, again, just really helps with your ROI, right? And I was thinking about how much our manager dashboards were really focused on this idea of understanding who your team is so that you can develop talent. And I know, Ahmad, this is a conversation you and I have had so many times around this idea of workforce development versus talent development. The idea that if you understand where your people are spending their additional time upskilling, that's something for you to keep in your back pocket, either to utilize on the team, give them some additional leadership space to do that. Perhaps you might recommend them for a promotion. You might suggest that they try something else. There's some really great spaces for there to be a win-win scenario for both the
Sure.
manager, the worker, as well as the team and the company, if you're keeping an eye on that. But also, I love the idea that although our focus is for Ahura to be for the learner, by the learner, all the things around the learner journey, right? But it doesn't mean that we can't include some spaces which we have for the manager to recommend a particular thing through the platform. You can see how people are utilizing their upskilling time if you're giving them time during the workday to do it or at all. You can see that. And I have to say, and you probably know this as well, you can acquire skills, but one of the things you look for when you're developing talent or looking for leadership is that person who is working, who has a plan, whatever it might be, and they're working toward it. So even if someone is working on in your team is working on skills that you can't see a connection to, they're working on something. And that is something for you to notice as someone that you might want to really connect to a mentor, or to use the kind of data you're seeing on our leaderboard screens during your performance review. There's some really beneficial spaces for conversations to happen. And again, we're not trying to replace the manager. We're trying to help make the manager's work more meaningful, more powerful, and have an amplified positive effect over any project they're working on going forward.
Great. So content, which I know this is an area that you love here, just related to content. Um, so the content piece of it, so it is about learning. We talked a lot about the technology and what it does to support the learner, but ultimately it's about what they get access to in terms of content that's aligned with their interests. How do you go by developing or building up content on behalf of the learners? Is this something that you do in-house, or is this something that, or does the technology allow for them to kind of go out and grab resources in the broad Google world?
It's been a really interesting journey around this, right? Because when I first came into Ahura, I kind of thought that that would be my major job, is really about creating some coursework, mostly for internal use, but whatever.
Sure.
But what I realized early on is that the way that Brian and Alex were thinking about this is that many companies have content. The internet has gotten better and better in terms of being able to suggest to you higher and higher quality content. Sounded great. So the idea for us was we had something that can fit over any scenario. Someone at home who's just taking a Coursera course or on a YouTube tutorial about Python, or it could be a company website or an LMS like Canvas, whatever. This can overlay and just be an additional thing. So, our site isn't grading papers or, doing that kind of thing, but it's adding additional things that could support whatever else you have going on, which, I mean, I think you and I both know, and probably these are conversations you've had with folks here before, that this is where we are with L&D and kind of HR tech, right? The idea that there's going to be a layering, a mosaic of
Mhm.
different things that will help you with the analytics you want. But what we've been finding for clients is oftentimes they want a little help with this. And so what I've been doing within internally with our team is we have sort of three kind of approaches. One, they have their own stuff and the AI is just overlaid to kind of help give them a sense of how well it's going with their content. Two, I can do some curating work. And for me, that means I'm not building out an entire course with, gorgeous slide decks or anything. What I'm helping is doing some of the Google search, but with the teacher lens. For
Sure.
example, I was working with a group of folks that are providing support for folks re-entering kind of like everyday community life after being incarcerated. And so they wanted to have some courses on like how to do PowerPoint or things of that nature. But they weren't sure, like they wanted just to wander about on Google. It might be really overwhelming. Could we curate? And so what I did was not just go, okay, I'll pick the first one, or oh, I'll do the PowerPoint hour-long tutorial from the folks that made PowerPoint.
Mhm.
Because when I looked at it, it had an automated voice narrator, which sounded so robotic. I can't imagine, if you haven't had a teacher in a while, if this was going to be your first teacher, I don't think it would be super engaging.
Yeah.
So I went through and
Total
found,
turn off.
yeah, I went through and found a narrator who seemed like just a little bit more animated and had a little bit more personality, and was pausing in a way that I felt matched that. So this is me as the teacher lens, curating, not just based on how many people had watched the video, but thinking about who my audience was. So another example, I was curating some how to get your license to fly a drone for particularly some like teenager kind of environment. So I definitely was looking for a YouTube course that was being narrated by hopefully either a university or a high school teacher. And I did, because again, they've got scope and sequence in a way that matches that group. So
Sure.
that's one thing. And then I also do create courses. Those are a lot more intensive in terms of time and beautiful graphics. But it seems like right now, the biggest piece that is most helpful is that curated space for then that group to take it and make it their own. But they've got the teacher part of, who's your audience? Who is this intended for? And is this going to be something that they can actually engage in?
Great. Before we finish this part of the interview, I want you to do a little bragging on Ahura AI. I know there's been some really good awards and recognitions that's come lately. You want to talk a little bit about what's coming forth with you?
Yeah, anyone that's involved in an early stage startup, there comes this tipping point where all this work, all this effort and planning and strategy, suddenly everything's just starts taking off. And that's what's happened in this past month. So, and one of them is that we got an award for being in the Elite 200 for the ASU GSB competition coming up in April in San Diego. Hopefully we'll get to see each other there as well, Ahmad, and just really proud and excited right now. Brian and Alex are in Davos at WEF, World Economic Forum, doing presentations, and then they're moving out to other areas of the world to continue sort of some higher level partnerships, not just with the business level, but actually like national level of educational systems. So things have moved both in scale and in scope, and definitely in speed. I feel like we are just like we've been heading toward the top of the hill, and now it's just starting to coast in a way that I don't know that I was ready for. It's very exciting. So yeah, things are really coming together. I know there's a lot of work to do, but it's nice to see that people are understanding the way that we're framing this about when you attend to your your team as learners first, you tap into a lot of things about them that are self-motivating, self-reinforcing, and can really help just explode the kinds of work you could envision that you could get done with your group. So it's been a journey in crafting our message and helping people connect to that bigger, deeper foundational level of what it means to be a learner, to be a supporter, to be a contributor. But it seems like we're getting there.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for telling us a little bit about Ahura AI. Am I saying that correctly?
Absolutely great. Yeah.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit about your website and where they could find this product?
Absolutely. So, AhuraAI.com is where you can go to see a little bit more about our company. And there'll also be a place there for you if you're interested in a bit more about how to use the platform or to gain access to kind of seeing how the AI works to schedule a call. There'll be a place for you to, there'll be a prompt for you to go ahead and fill out a little type form survey and we'll get right back to you. So, that's really what particularly our team is really focused on right now is when folks are reaching out that we're um, giving them the space to experience it, to see it, and to understand how it could be of value for their company, for their team.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much. A pleasure to be here.